Hello. My name's Jacob. The first thing you should know about me is that I love love. But unfortunately, this story isn't about love, it's about a breakup. But because I love love so much, in my mind, a breakup is just the perfect opportunity to win someone back. So, it's 2016, I'm 18 years old, and I've been living in the north of England for 6 months, working in a private boarding school, a really posh private boarding school called St Mary's Hall. And my girlfriend of 2 years was living back in Australia. And we decided that we were going to try long distance because really we'd only ever heard good things. But between me working 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, and her name was Ava, and she was just starting uni and trying to make friends. Between both of those things, we didn't really have a lot of time for each other, so most of our nights would end with Skype calls where it would be like 11 p.m. my time and I had to get up at 6 a.m. the next day. And so I'd answer the Skype and she'd be like, it was your turn to Skype me. And I'd be like, oh, I'm so sorry, I just finished work. And she'd be like, fuck you. And I'd be like, whoa, okay. That escalated quickly. For any of the kids in the audience, Skype is like Zoom. But it had a sweet little song that played when you called people. It slapped. So eventually we decide, we're fighting all the time, we decide, okay, we think it's time to call it quits. And we break up. And this was a good move because we were fighting all the time, but a not good move because a month earlier we had both booked and paid $3,000 for, non-refundable, a trip around Europe, a month-long trip around Europe via bus. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever done bus trips long haul. Those seats barely recline, let alone let you grieve the loss of a relationship. And so the bus trips kind of consisted of me in the window seat and my girlfriend in the seat next to me, the aisle seat, and I would have my little iPhone notes app open and I'd just be typing some sweet heartbreak poetry, trying to get her to notice that that's what I was doing, but also keep it pretty chill. So I'd be doing the old, it's fine, no, it's nothing. She did notice, she was incredibly uncomfortable. I'm so sorry. So I just noticed that I'm starting to be really sad around her, obviously, and I feel like I'm this extra bag that she kind of has to carry around to all of these cities. So we go through London and Paris, and eventually we get to Amsterdam. And I get off the bus and I give myself a little pep talk, and I say, Jacob, pick yourself up. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go out clubbing with the people in our hostel. So I turn to Ava and I say, hey, why don't we go clubbing? There's this clubbing night on. And she goes, yeah, that's a great idea. So we get to the club, and it's going really, really well. We're dancing, and we're just telling everyone that we're friends, and we're making friends with people in the hostel. And I go off to the bathroom to pee, not to do the other things that you do in an Amsterdam bathroom. And I come back, and I swear it was like a movie. I pushed my way through the crowd of people, all these people from Amsterdam. I push through, and there's a clearing in the dance floor, and I get to the clearing, and I look across the room, and there's Ava, and she's with Nathan from the hostel, and they are going for it. Hardcore going for it. And I mean, I should have seen it coming. I've never met a Nathan that I liked, to be fair. But in that moment, my heart, it breaks. And so the next day, we get back on the bus, and I'm typing my iPhone poetry, and I thought, I can't tell this story. I went scrolling through my phone, and I found this gem from the bus. I knew you before you cut your hair. I knew you before you crashed your car. I knew you in the front room of your house before I didn't know you at all. And then I've left a line and an indent for dramatic effect, obviously. And I've just written, I get sad. So, thank you so much. So, eventually the trip ends and it's awful. It is one of the worst months of my life. And I go back to work and Ava flies back home. And I'm sitting in my room at work and I think I've got to do something because I'm in this rut. And then it comes to me and I decide what I've got to do is I've got to win her back. And the way that I'm going to do that is by getting super, super hot. Now, I didn't know anything about people who had six-pack abs, but I knew a couple of things. One, that they ate less than most normal people, and two, that they seemed to work out all the time. So the school I was working at, they cooked for us. So I just cut down my portion sizes, and I quit sugar, and I do all the things that you do. And then for exercise, I noticed on YouTube that mostly people did weightlifting routines, but that didn't seem like my sort of thing. So I opted for something equally masculine, but a little bit different, skipping. So I would skip like a fucking little child. I would skip for 20 minutes a day, and then when I got a bit better, 30 minutes a day, and then when I got even better, an hour a day. And I had this vision in my mind that I would go home, fly back home to Ava, and I would kick down her door with my newly toned skipper's calves. And Ava would say, "Holy shit, Jacob, from the waist down, you look like a sculpture." So in my mind, that's what's happening. I'm thinking, wow, I'm getting super hot. But on the outside, my colleagues were seeing a different thing. And I remember, I'm sorry, gonna get heavy. I remember the first time my colleague Angela asked me whether I thought I had an eating disorder. And truthfully, I didn't, because in my mind, I was being practical about it. Ava was my best friend, I wanted to get her back. And when I got the body that I wanted, I would stop. But I never seemed to get the body that I wanted, so I didn't stop. And by the end of this whole routine, I was eating roughly 800 calories a day. And I don't know how much people know about calories, but it's not a lot of food. And I was skipping for like an hour a day after my shifts. And I always finished at 10 p.m. So I was skipping from like 10:15 to 11:15. And when I tell people this, they go, "Oh man, that's a red flag." But to me, I laugh because the only place I could skip was the playroom of this fucking primary school, which was right next to the kitchens, so the staff would be packing up like the dinner for the day and walk past the little playroom, and there I am, this 18-year-old boy skipping his little heart out. And so eventually, Angela corners me and she says, "Look, I really want to take you to the school nurse." And so I agree to go just to kind of prove that there's nothing wrong with me. And we get to the nurse's office, and I remember so vividly, they were lovely. The head nurse was a woman called Angela as well, and she took me in and she said, "Look, we understand you don't think you have a problem, but Angela's worried about you, so what we're going to do is we're just going to get you to jump on the scales and we'll go from there. How does that sound?" And that seemed fine to me. So I jumped on the scales and I looked down, and I remember so vividly seeing the number, and my knees buckled, and they had to catch me, and they put me in bed, and I just cried, and I cried, and I cried. When I started my little fitness journey, I was 75 kilos, which is just a little bit heavier than I am now. And when I looked down at the scales said 57 kilos. I'd lost 20 kilos in 2 months. Yeah, and when I agreed to tell this story for Andrea, one of my little personal goals was that I wanted to be as honest about it as possible, because we don't usually get a male perspective about eating disorders. So because I was skipping so much and eating so little, all of the muscle in my legs wore away. So walking was really painful, and getting out of bed was really painful. I would genuinely dread waking up, because it meant that little jump off from the bed would kind of ricochet through my body, and it hurt so much. My hair went really wispy and thin for some reason. I was cold all the time. It didn't matter where I was. I was cold. And to be most honest, and I hope this doesn't offend anyone, it shouldn't, but because your body is trying to preserve all the functions, like your brain and your heart and the things that really matter, all of the other functions kind of go by the wayside. So for a good 2 months there, I couldn't get an erection, which for an 18-year-old boy is a bit of a red flag. But again, I laugh because here I am trying to win back my 19-year-old girlfriend, and I decide the way to do that is to get the walk and the penis of an 80-year-old. Anyway, so eventually I get home and I go to see Ava and her family, and it's this moment that I've built up in my head so much. And I remember I got to the front door and I knocked, and they were all standing there. They opened the front door, and I was hoping that they would look excited to see me or proud of me or something, but they just looked scared. They looked so scared of what I'd done to myself and what I was obviously capable of doing in other areas of my life, I guess, I don't know. And when I was talking to Andrew about how I would try and link this story back to worth it, I kept coming up blank because there's no part of an eating disorder that is worth it. It's an awful disease, and it ruins your health and your mental health and your self-worth. But then I started to think about it, and I actually did learn a lot from it. I learned how to kind of respect myself a little bit more. I learned how to take care of myself and what healthy living actually looks like. And now I can stand here. I've got a new partner who I've had for 2 years, who I love more than anything. We have a dog called Moose. And if all of that was what it took to get to this point in my life right now, then hell yeah, that's worth it. Thank you so much.